Man, I wonder how many people are actually going to die before something is actually done about these buildings that are hijacked in Johannesburg. I mean, guys, when you sit back and think about it, South Africa is a crime scene. South Africa is a crime scene. How is it possible? How is it possible that someone can hijack a whole building in the middle of the city, turn that building into informal settlements, get the tenants, and now those people are the landlords? And it's insane that the only time we hear about these buildings in Johannesburg that are being hijacked, it's when something bad is happening. You remember last time when a building in Johannesburg, when one of these hijacked buildings in Johannesburg caught fire, where 80 people lost their lives, the Minister of Social Development, the ANC Minister of Social Development, came out and said that, man, that is not the fault of the African National Congress. That is the fault of apartheid. It is not the fault of the African National Congress. This is what the Minister of Social Development said when that building actually caught fire.
Unfortunately for us, whether we like it or not, this is the result of apartheid that kept people under such conditions, and we are expected to have changed those conditions within the 30 years.
So the Minister of Social Development is telling you that, man, 30 years, it is not enough for the ANC to fix all of these things that you people are complaining about. What is happening in Johannesburg, the fact that hijacked buildings in Johannesburg are catching fire, it is not the fault of the African National Congress. It is not the fault of the ANC, despite the fact that the ANC has been in charge of the country for the past 30 years. It is not the fault of the ANC that buildings are catching fire in the middle of the city. It is not the fault of the ANC that people are hijacking buildings in South Africa. It is not the fault of the ANC. That is the fault of apartheid. So do not try to hold ANC accountable for something that apartheid should answer for. Stop asking ANC questions. Stop saying, Ramaphosa, what is it exactly are you doing about these buildings that are hijacked in Johannesburg? Many people in Johannesburg, they don't have accommodation. Many students in Johannesburg, they don't have accommodation. But for some reason, man, these buildings that can actually be used for such are being hijacked in Johannesburg, and there's nothing that has been done about it. There's nothing that has been done about it, man.
You have a plan, somebody else comes in, does not even look at the plan to say, okay, I'm not in the same thinking as you, but what was good of this plan and what is it that I can do to implement the plan? Because unfortunately for us, whether we like it or not, this is the result of apartheid that kept people under such conditions, and we are expected to have.
What conditions is she talking about? What condition is she talking about, man? I'm so skeptical, man. I cannot wait to hear what the ANC Minister of Social Development is going to say this time. I cannot wait to hear what she's going to say this time, because if there's one thing that I've realized with this story and that past story is that the previous story, the nationality of the people who were actually affected by the fire, man, it was put out in the media. South Africans actually got to understand that many people that were actually affected by that fire in Johannesburg were people who don't come who don't come from South Africa. Many of the people that were affected by that fire in South Africa, man, were illegal immigrants. But when you look at this story, man, the nationality of the people that are affected by the fire, man, is kept under the rug. It's kept under the rug, because what I understand with this story is that 2 people lost their lives, 4 people were rushed to hospital, and 15 people were saved in the building, man. I think some of them were on top of the buildings and others were on the balconies when they were actually rescued from the whole buildings. And with this fire is completely different from the previous one, because you remember the fire in the previous building was because of the wiring in that informal settlement building. But this one, apparently there was a lady who actually had an argument with her man and started burning things in her unit that resulted in the whole block actually catching fire. So the circumstances of these fires are actually different, but what I want us to focus on, it is the fact that both of these buildings are hijacked buildings in Johannesburg, in the city of Johannesburg. In the city of Johannesburg. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, how is it possible? How is it possible, man, that these things are still happening in Johannesburg? How is it possible, man? Is the ANC government that helpless when it comes to this thing of illegal of hijacked buildings? Is the ANC government that helpless when it comes to these things?
Can you tell us about the latest one? Really very sad, heartbreaking, something that was avoidable, completely avoidable. I just want to remind South Africans about what I did to avert this. When I became the mayor of the city of Johannesburg in August 2016, on the 1st of December,
And to be honest, guys, when Herman Mashaba became the mayor of Johannesburg, man, more people started paying attention to this whole thing of hijacked buildings in Johannesburg. But before that, man, the whole thing was hush hush. The whole thing was hush hush, man. You will never find the stories of hijacked buildings in the middle of Johannesburg. You would never find those stories. But Herman Mashaba, when he became the mayor of Johannesburg, he actually spearheaded this campaign of dissolving these hijacked buildings in Johannesburg. He actually spearheaded that, and people started talking about the fact that many buildings in Johannesburg are actually hijacked. Many buildings in Johannesburg are informal settlements. Man, people can die any day. People can die any day because those buildings, man, the way the water in those buildings is feeded in, the way the electricity is wired in those buildings, man, anything can happen at any given time. Anything can happen. So we are just sitting here waiting for another disaster to take off in one of those hijacked buildings in Johannesburg. We are waiting for another disaster to take off in one of those buildings.
during my 100 days, to give an update to the residents of my position, what I found, and what my plans were. One of the issues I raised and raised unapologetically was the issue of hijacked buildings in a city where we had over 300.
Because when you remember, guys, the last time when the Joburg mayor, the new Joburg mayor, that Guadamama guy, he said that, man, the reason why the Joburg government is failing to do something about these buildings that are hijacked in Johannesburg is that the people who are actually hijacking these buildings, man, they have human rights lawyers that are actually making it hard for the government in Johannesburg to actually do something about these buildings that are being hijacked. They say these people have human rights lawyers, man, and these human rights lawyers, man, are using South Africa's constitution against them. And these people, man, are getting away with hijacking the buildings in South Africa. So how many buildings are actually going to be hijacked in South Africa? How many buildings are hijacked in Durban? How many buildings are hijacked in Cape Town? I'm thinking about those things. How many? Because if those people may know that if we can get our hands on a building, there's nothing that government can do to us. There's nothing that government can do to us. So those people, man, will be motivated to go to other cities and to hijack the buildings of other cities. So how many buildings in South Africa in general, how many buildings have actually been hijacked?
What can you tell us about the latest one?
Really very sad, heartbreaking, something that was avoidable, completely avoidable. I just want to remind South Africans about what I did to avert this. When I became the mayor of the city of Johannesburg in August 2016, on the 1st of December, during my 100 days, to give an update to the residents of my position, what I found, and what my plans were. One of the issues I raised and raised unapologetically was the issue of hijacked buildings in a city where we had over 300,000 housing backlog, but at the same time, a city that was in fast becoming in decay. A city just 20 years, 30 years earlier, as you are aware, Johannesburg was one of our most modern cities. We witnessed its decay over time. So when I took over, I said, no, we cannot allow this situation to continue. Where our own people, particularly South Africans, live in squalor in this what we call informal settlements, which are squatter camps. And at the same time, we allow criminal syndicates to take over the city. And I said, this is not going to happen under my watch, under my authority. I said, we are going to embark on a massive project to reclaim this city, offer it to the private sector to build affordable accommodation for South Africans. And unfortunately, at the time, some people decided to unleash vitriol against me, calling
Yeah, of course, man. You know, when Herman Mashaba said that, man, we need to give these buildings to the people in the private sector so that they can provide accommodation for South Africans. People started saying, man, Herman Mashaba, this is the reason why you wanted to. This is the reason why you wanted to dissolve these hijacked buildings in Johannesburg, because you wanted to help your friends in the private sector. Herman Mashaba wanted to do that because he understood that the South African government is not capable of actually doing that. The South African government will not do what he wanted to do. The South African government will not even invest in those buildings. They will not do that. So Herman Mashaba came with a solution that, man, we can take these buildings, man, private sector, and these people in the private sector that can actually do something about these buildings. And people actually bashed Herman Mashaba for that and said, Herman Mashaba, man, you see, you are a capitalist pig. You are a capitalist pig, man. You would do anything to help your friends. You would do anything to help your friends. So people were actually okay with the buildings in Johannesburg being hijacked by illegal foreigners. People were actually okay with that because they hated Herman Mashaba so much. They hated the idea of a capitalist working with other capitalists to provide better environment for South Africans. They hated that idea. So they actually bashed Herman Mashaba and made it look like Herman Mashaba calling for those buildings, man, to be taken over by the private sector was the worst thing, was the worst suggestion that Herman Mashaba could actually come up with. It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate because if we have to be honest, the ANC government, man, will not do anything about those buildings. The fact that today those buildings are being hijacked, it is the fact that the ANC government has actually failed to do something about those buildings. This is the reason why those buildings are hijacked, because they don't care about those buildings. They don't. They don't. So when someone comes and says, guys, we need to start doing something tangible about these buildings, people are saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that, man. You want to help your friends there. You want to help your white monopoly capital friends to take over those buildings. No, we are fine with those buildings, man, being hijacked by people that we don't even know. We are fine with those buildings being hijacked, turned into informal settlements, man. We are fine with people living in those kind of in those kind of conditions. We are okay with that. We are okay with that. This is what people said to Herman Mashaba. And today, man, we are reaping the rewards of that, because Herman Mashaba actually wanted to fight this thing of hijacked buildings in Johannesburg. He actually wanted to fight this whole thing.
Me all sorts of names and so forth. But lucky, I had the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa behind me. I had a moral ground behind me. And I went on that move. I served for 3 years. In the 3 years, I served as an executive mayor of the city of Johannesburg. I managed to expropriate 154 buildings, offer them to the private sector through council. 154 buildings. We identify all in all 600 buildings which were on our radar screen. By the time I
Jesus, 600 buildings. 600 buildings, man. It means that the whole of Johannesburg is an informal settlement. The whole of Johannesburg CBD is an informal settlement, guys. Can you think about it? 600 buildings. 600 buildings. And Herman Mashaba only got his hands on a couple of hundreds of buildings, but 600 buildings. The whole of Johannesburg, man, it's an informal settlement. The whole city. The whole city, man.
left, we had already awarded 154 buildings to the value of 32 billion rands in investment to create 22,000 permanent jobs, create 14,000 housing opportunities. And part of these housing opportunities, our condition to the private sector was that 30% of all the units must actually go to residents paying plus minus 1,000 rands a month. And the private sector had absolutely no problem with it. We were oversubscribed when we put these properties in the market. And I committed to people of South Africa that I will release a minimum of 100 buildings every single year, as long as I'm a mayor. If you look at your records, the last council meeting I attended before the ANC and the DA planned to have a motion of no confidence against me. The last council meeting, the records are there. I had already presented at that council meeting 30 factories in and around Wynberg, Alexander area and other areas. Council approved that I can start a process of awarding these factories to turn into low-cost housing for for South Africans. Unfortunately, that move by the DA and the ANC to remove me as executive mayor, I just could not wait for a motion of no confidence. I left, and upon my departure, you can ask Johannesburg Property Company. They were given instruction by the ANC new government to put that project on ice. They called it the Mashaba project. And that project had nothing
You know those people, man, they are so good with identifying the issue. Mashaba project. It is a Mashaba project.
to do with my personal name. It was a project for people of South Africa. It was a project to save our city. So what we are seeing happening right now, it is still really the beginning until such time that this government, this unpatriotic, uncaring government is removed. Otherwise, if we can try anything else, we can try it, but we must understand, we must accept the consequences of us being afraid to really deal with issues head on. Because if we think we can deal with this with sort of political platitudes, we will be playing with the lives of South Africans and innocent people.
I mean, guys, is it too late for something to actually be done about these buildings? Is it too late? Because when Herman Mashaba talks about like 600 buildings, man, it means that these buildings are actually hijacked by people who are actually serious, man. These are not amateurs, man. The people who are hijacking these buildings are not amateurs. Is it too late for something to actually be done about these buildings? Is it too late? Is it too late? Guys, how many people are supposed to die, man? How many people are supposed to die in Johannesburg before something is actually done? How many? Guys, please tell me what you think on the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button. And the most important part is subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.